everyone wants that rugged, go anywhere image. Wide handlebars, chunky tires, tall stance, and just enough dirt on Instagram to suggest you have conquered the wilderness. But here's the thing, most scramblers today spend more time outside coffee shops than they do outside civilization.
And that brings us to this, the BSA Scrambler 650. For its introductory price, it's currently the most accessible 650cc scrambler currently on sale in India. And by that fact, it is also 50,000 rupees cheaper than the Royal Enfield Bear 650. But does cheaper mean compromise, and can this motorcycle actually scramble?
Before even throwing a leg over it, the Scrambler 650 certainly looks the part. It has all the ingredients you'd expect from a classic scrambler recipe. Wide handlebar, minimal bodywork, tall stance, classic ribbed seat.
And while BSA has absolutely nailed it with the silhouette, the only problem here is that the old school theme isn't consistent in some places.
The switchgear comes straight from the Java and ESD parts bin, and honestly, it feels out of place here. The same goes for the inverted digital display. For a motorcycle that leans so heavily into retro charm, something more traditional would have suited the character far better. Maybe the twin pod setup from the Gold Star, or even an analog inspired single pod unit. At 820mm, the seat height is around 40mm taller than the Gold Star. That sounds intimidating on paper, but in reality, it isn't.
I'm 5'7" and I can almost flat foot on this motorcycle, so average height riders should be fine. Shorter riders will need some time to get used to the seat height. The riding triangle is classic scrambler style. It's upright and engaging. And because you sit taller, you get a commanding view of the traffic. You can literally see over most cars ahead, which is surprisingly useful in Mumbai's chaotic traffic. And despite weighing more than the Gold Star, this motorcycle hides its weight pretty well. Its balance is predictable, and it's actually easier to filter through traffic than you'd expect. The irony here is that this motorcycle is designed to leave the city behind, but instead is actually very comfortable living in it.
Powering the Scrambler is the same 652cc single-cylinder engine as the Gold Star. The output remains unchanged, but BSA says the mapping has been revised to better suit the Scrambler character.
At the very get-go, the initial response might not be explosive. In fact, I'll say it's slightly softer for a single big bore. However, open the throttle further and this engine just launches ahead with poise.
The motor builds speed progressively. There's plenty of torque available, and overtakes don't require much planning. Being a large capacity single, it also delivers that characteristic pulse through the chassis.
What's interesting is that the engine almost behaves like a gentleman in the lower revs. But the higher you rev it, the more it reminds you that it's still a giant single-cylinder mill.
Below 4000 RPM, vibrations are largely manageable, but cross 5000 RPM and they become much more noticeable. Not unbearable, but enough to remind you that this isn't a parallel twin. Out on the highway, the Scrambler settles into an easy rhythm. The upright ergonomics remain comfortable. The engine has enough performance for effortless cruising. But there's one thing that becomes increasingly noticeable the longer you ride: heat. The right side of the motorcycle gets quite hot, particularly around the exhaust area. In city traffic, it's noticeable. On slower roads, it's even more apparent.
Out on the tarmac, the Scrambler really impressed us with its road manners than expected. And now we are going to be riding it off it. Because looking rugged and being rugged are two completely different things.
The suspension setup leans towards comfort, and for everyday riding, that's good news. The ride quality remains largely pliant. Sharp bumps are absorbed reasonably well, and rough roads don't immediately upset the chassis.
The suspension setup isn't trying to be like a serious off-roader, and honestly, that's exactly how it needs to be. And to be honest, for 90% of the owners, this motorcycle is going to be ridden on the road. So, can it scramble? Yes. But can it be your go-to bike for everything? Not quite.
The 19-inch front wheel, ground clearance, wide handlebar, and upright ergonomics help build confidence on loose surfaces. The motorcycle can comfortably tackle dirt roads, gravel tracks, and even light trails.
So if you are imagining multi-day, hardcore off-road adventures with this one, then this motorcycle isn't quite meant for it. The weight eventually does catch up with you, and the chassis is most enjoyed when ridden in a relaxed manner.
The Scrambler 650 is a capable off-roader, but it clearly enjoys tarmac more. Think of it as a roadster that isn't afraid of getting dirty rather than a dedicated off-roader. The braking hardware is pretty well suited for this motorcycle, and it manages to shed speed quite effectively for the most bit. It is only when you are riding in a spirited manner when the bike's weight adds more effect and the brakes can feel a bit inadequate. Handling is where this Scrambler reveals its true personality. In traffic, it's surprisingly agile, but when you start pushing harder through corners, things change. This motorcycle prefers smooth flowing inputs rather than aggressive corner attacks. It's stable, predictable, confidence inspiring, but not particularly sporty, which is perfectly acceptable because that's not really its mission.
Feature-wise, the Scrambler keeps things fairly straightforward. And while it suits the motorcycle's old-school character and nature, execution isn't quite perfect. The digital console feels mismatched and the switchgear lacks the premium appeal. And the overall feature list isn't particularly extensive.
One area where the motorcycle does impress is overall fit and finish. The paint quality feels premium. The motorcycle feels substantial. And there is a genuine case of occasion every time you ride it.
Owning a motorcycle isn't just about that. What also matters is what you do with it.
And this is where BSA still has some work to do. The biggest concern remains after-sales support. Classic Legend says improvements are underway and hopefully it will arrive sooner rather than later.
So, is the BSA Scrambler 650 a proper scrambler? Well, the answer is yes, provided your scrambling involves mild trails rather than a full-blown expedition. What it really is a road-focused scrambler that has enough capability to confidently explore off the tarmac. And honestly, that's what most buyers are looking for anyway. The motorcycle looks fantastic, it's comfortable, and the engine has got character. And at its introductory price, it significantly undercuts its closest rivals. If your idea of adventure involves coming to places like this rather than crossing continents, then the BSA Scrambler 650 surprisingly and convincingly makes a good case for itself. Because sometimes looking the part isn't enough, and fortunately for BSA, this one can actually play the part too.